Welcome back, everybody. That's what she said Wednesday. Mic check. All right, ladies. It's the middle of the week. And if I could tell y'all anything, it feels like the middle of the week to me. Y'all ever moved and just like you lose I have no idea. I know it's Wednesday at 6:00. Well, that's about all I know at this point. How was your guys' week? Patty, don't answer that. Jade, Naseema, how are your week?
It's been a week. Definitely think this is an interesting season for me. So, I'm sure we'll talk about that.
Oh, an interesting season. What about you, Jade? What's going on in your world?
Nothing. Same. Tired today.
Is that the general consensus? Is tired? Because that's me. That's all of us.
Yes, very.
Wow. Okay. So I think that this is important. This is a moment where we can actually like reflect and, give a real world example of what it's like for us on a day to day. We're all very busy. We all have businesses, jobs. Naseema and Patty have children that they're balancing everything with. And sometimes we're just tired, but half the battle is just showing up. So I'm going to applaud us all for just showing up. So good work, ladies. All right. We're due for a good conversation. So I want to, something got brought to my attention. A podcast got sent to me recently by a friend, and it was a really interesting, not a new concept, but it broke something down in a way that I felt like we had to bring to the show. And, I think that there's a certain culture around, women being taken care of and things of that nature. And oh man, and in the wise words of Jasmine Sullivan, these hoes be winning, but the reality is that no one is coming to save you, right? Or us. And so when I heard this podcast, which I'm going to tell you about in just a quick second, it just really solidified a concept that I've heard people talk about before, but it wasn't really until the last couple of years where I really started to act as if radical self-responsibility is entirely my thing. It's up to me, right? Everything that is going on in my life, I have a hand in, and that's not necessarily a direct hand. It's not saying that things don't happen to me, but I have a direct hand in what I allow, the situations that I put myself in, the all of those things. So anyway, this podcast basically said that there are 3 narratives, reflective narratives, right, that we actually can have about ourselves. So I'm going to run them down for you guys really quickly. But that first narrative is the hero narrative, which when you're thinking about yourself or people that you want to work with or have any type of relationships with, you are looking for people that have a hero self narrative. And that is basically, and I'm going to grab my notes just so I don't butcher this, but long and the short, a hero self narrative is basically, hey, things are going to happen, trials and tribulations are going to occur, but we can persevere. We're going to get through this. We're going to figure this out. And we're pretty optimistic in our belief in ourselves and the others around us that everything will be okay. And that if it relies on my effort, I'm going to show up and it will be that. That's the hero self narrative. The other is the healer narrative. And the healer narrative is often the caretaker. It is the people pleaser. It's the put everybody's needs before my own. It is sometimes we don't even have a choice but to be, in that healer, narrative. And those people, might even have this kind of concept that, their whole life is about giving or fixing people, right? And that's where they find their value and or their purpose in that. And then the third self-narrative is the victim. Right. And we've heard this a million times, which is no matter what I do, this is how my life is going. This is what's happening in my life right now. It's one of those like people that have bad luck all the time. Have you guys met those people where it's like, dang, something bad is always happening to you? How the hell? How are you even still living? It was this and then it was that and then it was this and then it was that. And they show up and they aren't necessarily woe is me, but haven't really accepted the fact that they have a direct impact or control in what is happening to and around them, right? And that's the victim self narrative. So I want to make sure that I also add some color. I might be hero most of the time, and one day I might fall into a healer mentality, or I might fall into a victim mentality. And also, and so it's not necessarily permanent. I would say, what is it the majority of the time, right? If you're trying to self-identify. And then the other part is that not only does it necessarily, like, does it change, but it might not be what you present to the general public either, right? So maybe my own self-talk is victim mentality. However, to the world, I might seem like something else, right? So when we're talking about that narrative, I think it was really profound, because I'm like, dang, okay, if I can classify or meet people and try to presume or get to know them to understand what their narrative is inside of their head, it might help me find some better alignment moving forward. So anyway, that took me down this whole train of thought where, radical self-responsibility is this season of my life. If something isn't the way I want it to go, if something's happening in a way that I don't want it to happen, if I'm in an environment I don't want to be in, it is my responsibility and my responsibility only to make that change. And so I'm the baby of the bunch here. So this might be something that you guys have already come to terms with, at another point, or when, a couple years back. But I want to know when that point was for you all, when you realized that no one is coming to save me. I'm not about to hit that lottery. I'm not hitting that jackpot on that slot machine. I'm not cashing in a golden ticket. I'm not getting swooped up by some Saudi prince, and my life is about to be just forever changed, right? Where you realize where you had to take complete control. And so that's what I want to talk about today, ladies.
I remember getting to that point probably in my mid 30s when I was going through my process of like learning about my finances and all this kind of stuff. It kind of became this journey of just personal exploration, like really learning how to be a better person overall. And that was one of the concepts that I learned early on. And the way it was presented was like, it's the way to get your power back. Like, it's totally empowering to be fully responsible for yourself. Like, sometimes radical self responsibility means that, like, you say like, oh, everything is on me, so I can't blame the next person. No, it's like putting yourself in a position to make decisions to better yourself, and not it's just empowerment, right? It's self-empowerment. So it changes the way that you look at your life. It changes the way that you approach things. It changes the way that you face obstacles. And it's helped me be able to learn lessons from the testaments that I have gone through in my life, and to be able to learn and grow from them and be able to bounce back faster. But like, I learned it in my mid 30s. So around, like you, Kelani, a little bit later, but not too long ago. And I was just like, oh, why didn't I learn this earlier? But there's a lot of stuff like that we aren't taught. Like, learning to love yourself is something I had to learn as an adult. And, those, you know, things that we have to work on internally, that we have to stumble upon later because we weren't necessarily taught those lessons. I mean, I went from, being raised by a single dad to going into college and being like heavily focused on academics and career, going to grad school, being heavily focused on my career. So I didn't have a lot of time to do a lot of internal work. And when I was able to finally and slow down and do that, I was very mature. Um, so I wish these are things that I try to teach my daughters now, because I didn't have anyone to teach me that. But yeah, it did come a lot later, but definitely shapes how I react and how I navigate through life.
That's good, Nastima. And so when you say I had to learn how to love myself,
hmm
what was that? Because I think a lot of times we might project or try to find validation in things that don't actually serve us or love us, right? We're soothing a lot of the time versus truly
hmm
loving ourselves, because sometimes loving ourselves means doing hard stuff, right? So what was that moment for you? How did you learn that?
I never even thought about the concept of loving myself, because I always first of all, like loving yourself kind of seems kind of vain when you just say it, right? And so you're taught like I was taught to be really humble, to not be vain, all of those things, but not understanding that like really loving myself is really about putting myself first and making not putting myself first, but putting myself in situations where I'm not harming myself, where I'm, investing in myself. And I guess I just wasn't ever taught that because I really was taught like and drilled in like, okay, like be a good person, but really focus on, you know, checking off these boxes to be successful and not really learning how to do that internal work, like that self-reflection work and all those kind of things. Like those things were afterthoughts, if not even mentioned. And so like the sit back and like understand like loving yourself like as like a thing, it was mind blowing. It was just like, oh, okay. Like, and again, it shaped how I maneuvered, it shaped how I moved through life. But it was just nothing that I thought of until I just sat down in that, like in the work of doing that.
Mm-hmm. That's really good. Go ahead, Jade.
Radical self-responsibility. I think that started for me very early on. Um, when you're raised with a Jamaican father that he like literally drills in you that you have to do everything on your own. You're supposed to be independent. You're supposed like you have to figure out so much. Whew, Lord, I can't even remember a time, being honest. I mean, obviously, I mean, I had my parents growing up, right? But it was a very divided household. So you just kind of had to learn to navigate and figure certain things out on your own. I will say probably when I really, really knew that I was on my own was when I graduated high school and I went off to college in the sense of like, hey, it's all me right now. You know what I mean? But I was raised to be very, very, very independent. I think that I'm actually just now within the last 2 years, maybe getting to a point where I am learning to accept help and lean on other people and allow people in my space. So mine is pretty opposite of a Nasima in that way. I wish that I had a healthier balance growing up. You know what I mean? I wish that there was. I often feel like I don't know how to relax because I'm so busy thinking ahead. I'm so busy thinking about how my decisions will affect everybody else around me. I'm so busy thinking. Sorry if I'm freezing up. I feel like I'm freezing up. Am I freezing?
It's
Your
I think it's
crackling.
your mic.
mic's
I
a
think
little
it's
cracky.
I think
Okay,
it might be your headphones because
might
they
be
do
my
that.
headphones. I don't
Yeah.
know. Let me see. Let me see if it's better if I just
Yeah, we can't hear you, but if you want to adjust your mic, your settings real quick, and it'll bring you back in. Since you disconnected the headphones, that's an interesting. Like, at surface level, this conversation, it's kind of like generally speaking, it's like, okay, well, kind of easy concepts, right? Nasima just said love yourself. Jay just said accept help, right? So I'm going to like keep track of some of these actual tips to go ahead and, work on taking radical self-responsibility. But this is actually a really, really heavy topic because now you have to confront yourself. You have to sit in the mirror and you have to examine what it is about you that you're happy with, what you're unhappy with, the circumstances, the situations, all of those things, right? And so this is actually a really, really heavy topic. So I'm down to go as deep as you guys are willing to go, given the weight of this topic. So you're back, Jade. I think we can hear you.
Okay. Well, no, I mean, basically, long story short, I was just saying, I think that I grew up where I was always overthinking. I was always expected to be the responsible one. I was always expected to make the right decisions. I was always had this thing this monkey on my back where I always was like, if I make this decision, how will it affect everybody in my family? And how will it affect my friends? And how will it affect? So it's like, I really didn't have, I'll just say mentally, I never really gave myself that space to kind of like, be super young. Even though I did have fun, my fun was like, hey, we're gonna kick it. But I'm also thinking at the same time, I'm watching everybody, I'm covering people, I'm you know what I mean, don't like to sit with my back to the door because I'm like, y'all wilding out. I'm wilding out too, but I'm also watching the room, right? So, yeah, I think that my radical self responsibility happened for me really, really early on. And also, that comes from a place of my parents didn't get along very well growing up. So I felt like there was this responsibility for me in some kind of crazy way to protect my mom, right? And so, and that is carried over into adulthood where I take care of my mom. And, you know, the roles have reversed where it's almost like I'm mother, she's daughter. So yeah, sometimes I wish I did not feel so responsible. Like I want to have those sporadic, free for all, living on the edge, who gives a damn moments. But I don't really have, I haven't allowed myself to have it. I don't know how.
Interesting. So you know what? And if I'm discerning correctly, Jade, I'm hearing, you know, how you coped when you were a lot younger, and just because I know you personally, you know, not to say too much, but you know, one of the things you and I talked about recently was, you know, what we experienced as young people in our households, how we were in very performance-based households, right? And then we grow up and we're still kind of in that same performance-based lane. But, you know, although you were responsible, you were responsible when you were young in those situations, but your evolution of radical self-responsibility came from other experiences or situations we got into as adults because of that responsibility. Does that make sense? Right? So I'm a kid, I'm responsible, my parents aren't getting along, I have to be an adult at a really, really young age. So I grow up being responsible. However, because I have wounds from being a child who didn't get to be a child, I now gravitate to relationships that aren't actually serving me. And so my radical self-responsibility is to go to therapy, heal my wounds, cut off relationships that don't serve me, put myself through hard things. And that, you know, I want to know when that Jade was born. When did that realization happen for Jade?
That I need to go to therapy?
Well, that you had adult issues, right? That childhood trauma was living in you as an adult. When was that?
I think that I didn't realize that until I got married. Because my marriage was so terrible. You know, it was very short-lived, but it was so terrible. And to me, the only solution that was really my first time going to therapy on my own, or we went as a couple. And when I'm sitting in there, the therapist telling me like, you're trying to be the end all tell all because you played that, you know, because of daddy issues per se, you know what I mean? Or issues from when you were growing up. Like that's to me when a lot of things were revealed to me constantly feeling like I needed to defend myself and defend my character. And, you know, if at the time my ex was saying false things about me or whatever. And she was like, why do you keep defending yourself? She was like, you keep trying to prove, because of a performance-based household. We constantly had to prove our worth and how great we were. And like, look, I made good grades today. And look how many basketball points I made. And look, I'm not pregnant. And look, I'm not doing drugs. And look, and all these other things, you know. But that was revealed to me when I first started going to therapy. And so after obviously I got divorced or whatever, I stopped going to therapy. And because I thought that, oh, look, like I have the issue out of the way and let me move on. And then I started realizing that I began having other relational problems because now it was such a toxic relationship. I had an inability to now connect to people. I did not want to connect. I did not want to get to know anybody new. I was really playing this avoidance game, and I realized it just was super unhealthy. So yeah, like you got to look in the ugly mirror sometimes. You got to realize like it ain't everybody else. If I'm like pushing everybody away, I'm the common denominator. So
yeah, 100%. Patty, what's brewing over there for you, my dear?
I mean, I think that radical self-responsibility is this idea that things are happening for me, not to me. I think that if you're going to take responsibility for your actions and everything that's happening, it does require the ugly mirror, right? I mean, you do have to be very brutally honest with yourself. Everything is a result of your own actions, you know? And you started with making a point about how some people always view things through the lens of negativity. Like, why did this happen? This happened. Oh, it's negative. It's woe was me. Why is this happening to me? Or this is negative. Or why are people so nasty? I hate when people argue, or I hate when people are this, or people are always stealing from me, right? There's these people that just constantly are talking about, you know, I look on Twitter on my timelines. There's some people that are always like, some people are always like, always people are people this, people that. I'm just like, when's the last time you said something positive? Like you said, if it's you're the common denominator, right? When is the last time you looked at a situation and saw the good in it and saw the learning opportunity? That's not easy. Some of those situations in a business setting could cost $20,000. A mistake can cost $20,000. Well, I can do two things. I can completely ruin the relationship with my employee that's been with me for 7 years because they made a $20,000 mistake, or I can shake it off and say, hey, you know, this happened because I could have done this differently. This is what you could have done differently. And next time we can't let this happen again, right? In a work setting. But in a private setting or in a more personal setting, I think it's like I said, victims live with blinders. Like you're never going to be able to get through and have a breakthrough if you constantly see things as what someone else did, right? Or how someone else made something happen to you, or how someone else did something to you. And it doesn't necessarily mean that other circumstances or outside circumstances didn't create an environment to where these things could occur. It means that you're choosing to define it differently to rise above it. And I think that's really the differentiating factor. If we're talking about nobody's coming to save you, I think that that's also a dangerous line because, for example, nobody's coming to save me, right? Like if I couldn't make my mortgage payment this month, I'm not depending on anyone else to come make that payment for me. But if I have to talk about what it means to not have a victim mentality, I have 4 women right here, 3 other women right here that I can have that conversation with and work through my thoughts effectively. So although no one's coming to save you and you've got to figure things out on your own and take responsibility for it, that doesn't mean that you don't have a supportive environment that you can create where there's going to be some more balance. The idea here is that you're not looking at life through the lens of it's happening to me. You're looking at life through the lens of it's happening for me. Everything is an opportunity to learn.
Okay, so you said something that was so good, and I want to dive into it a little bit, right? Because I think that looking in the ugly mirror part, you know, for some people that happens at rock bottom, whatever their rock bottom is, right? Like, holy crap, my life's a shit show, or I have sometimes that moment for people, like it doesn't have to be your rock bottom moment or when you are the offender or the cause of said thing that is causing you to have these thoughts. I think, you know, if we're talking about being honest with ourselves, there's something to be said for the honesty for the part that you played, even if you aren't the offender, right? And so you might not have been the one to cause the problem. You might not have been the abuser. You might not have been the boss that got called, you know, to HR. You might not have been the person that was committing the offense. However, when we're talking about radical self-responsibility, there is a part that we all play. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you're looking in the mirror needs to start with that negative part. You're looking in the mirror can start with, wow, this doesn't feel right. This situation doesn't seem right. How did I get here to even be in this position to where I am experiencing the offense, right? Or the oppression of some sort, or whatever that might be. And that's a hard pill to swallow too, because you call yourself being a good person, right? Like being in a friendship, for example. I'm using this as an example. Say you have a childhood friend and that's your girl, that's your homie, that's your like ride or die. And say your friend was getting into some crap and somehow you just happen to be with her when she's getting into crap all the time. And it's like, dude, I'm not trying to be in your crap, right? I didn't do it. I'm here with you because I love you and I'm a good friend and I'm down. But at some point we have to draw a line, create a boundary and say, hey, because of this, I'm finding myself in situations I don't want to be in, or I'm having to defend you in times that you're wrong, or whatever the case might be. And that's a light example. If we really, really put our lives under a microscope, we have full responsibility for where we end up and when we're there, as an adult. So I just wanted to add that point, Patty. You made me think a little deeper into that.
I think that one of the issues is when you're talking about radical self-responsibility, people that have it, they're annoyed by people that don't, right? You're annoyed by people that
Right.
never really take responsibility. It's
Why
everybody
are you
else.
calling me out?
No, but it's so true, because here's the thing. Let's talk about radical self-responsibility in the sense of, if I see someone make a mistake and I see the results from that offense or mistake, why do I have to go make the same mistake? Why can't I learn from their mistake and say, okay, if I put my hand on the stove, I watched them get burnt. Like, taking responsibility, to your point, Kaylani, means I don't have to go experience it for myself, but I am going to choose to watch, pay attention, and learn from somebody else. I'll go back to my marriage, for example. I take responsibility. I wasn't necessarily the offender, right? Not that I was perfect, but people ask me all the time, before you got married, did you see the red flags? Absolutely. I did. And you know what I did? I chose to ignore them. I chose to think that love was enough. I chose to, allow certain things to happen and not put my foot down. So I helped to create the monster that occurred, right? And when you're dealing with people that have major insecurities, the more you coddle and the more you try to make it better, you're growing the monster. I helped to grow that monster. It wasn't just on him,
Yeah.
And so now I have to learn that lesson and say, when I'm getting into another relationship, hey, maybe I shouldn't ignore certain red flags. Maybe I think love is a beautiful thing, but perhaps I should look for things past love. Maybe love isn't enough. Maybe there are some other qualities and core values that I should be looking for outside of just love. So that's on me. That's not on him. He was consistent.
he told you who he was. He showed you who he was, right?
Real talk.
Yeah, that's really good, Jay.
I think that's the hardest thing to do in a relationship, when you have spent a long time making excuses and compromises for someone's behavior, to really be like, damn, I'm the one who did this. It's my fault. Like, he wasn't lying. He was telling me the truth. His actions told me everything I needed to know, but I lingered in this and told myself that I believed in the maybe, possibly, in the Lord willing, of it all, right? Like, yeah, one day, yeah, maybe, yeah, that's hard. And that's personally why I've chosen to stay away from relationships, because I'm one Lord willing away from losing my cool on the male race.
No, I was there. I've been there. I've been through that too, Jay. Like that, and that's part of the radical self-responsibility, is being like, you know what? I did do those things. I did ignore those red flags, and I made excuses. And I see where those excuses came from. They didn't come from a bad place. It came from a place where you wanted to trust that that person would change or be different. Or maybe if they saw you move in a certain way, they'd be like, oh, okay, well, it's not that bad. Or maybe I'll adapt to this. You didn't get married to get a divorce. And so you try to do what you can do to make sure that marriage works out. But in all of that, like, I had a very short marriage too. And it took me almost half of the time that I was married to go through counseling to even be at a point where I could just be like, enough is enough, and to leave that marriage, because of all of the things that we built up. And part of that was taking radical self-responsibility, because all of these excuses and behaviors that we've accepted now compound. And number one, because you are taking responsibility, you feel like, well, it's my fault, so maybe I should just stay and work it out, because like you said, that person is consistent. They are who they are. They've always been, but it's on me. But you have to, in order to tear down those layers and get to a place where you can heal and you can move on, you have to get to that place of acceptance and understanding. And it's really hard to get there.
It's funny with this theme that we're talking about right now. Isn't part of radical responsibility is taking responsibility for how people treat you? and
Yes.
what you know what I'm saying?
My
Like,
mama taught me that
Yeah.
real young. Rule number one: teach people how to treat you.
Yeah.
Rule number one.
and I think that we've all compromised at a certain point because of loyalty, whether that's friendships, because of, I can even say,
Trauma.
money sometimes, being comfortable with, like at a job where you're like, well, shoot, like I need this check. You know what I mean? So, all right, everybody's boss is a jerk or however you want to, but you know what I mean? Like, that's part of radical responsibility too, is being able to say, like, if I'm going to set boundaries for myself, I also have to trust that if I remove myself from a situation that is not healthy, that is no longer serving me, that God is gonna take care of me. Like, that's a part of radical responsibility, is our faith too. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It kind of all intertwines. So I hate showing my nails right now because I don't have any on. This is so terrible. I'm sorry to the audience.
I don't think anyone was looking till now. Now we looking. But you know what? Speaking of like spirituality, I think one of the things, when you talk about inspecting a situation or whatever, right? And you're saying, okay, this is the role that I played in that. There's an additional layer of like, okay, well, why? Why am I allowing this? What is it in me that is accepting less than? What is it about, my situation, my trauma, my things that that's the type of truth that I want to get to. Not that, okay, this person was a piece of shit, they wronged me. Yes, I stayed and I allowed it, but you know what? Now I'm setting a boundary. Okay, but why? Right? Why? And one of the things, I want to talk about the fruit of the spirit real quick for a quick second, right? Because if anyone's listening to this and they have no idea how to begin to examine themselves or inspect anything for truth, I would encourage you to look at the fruit in your life. And what do I mean by fruit? I mean, what are your relationships like? What is your relationship with self, right? With self, with others? Are you operating in a lot of joy? Is there a lot of trauma? Or is there drama? Is there jealousy? All of those things, right? The symptom is the stuff that we're talking about right now. The root, if you examine the fruit of your life, right? Fruit of the spirit. And here, so I don't miss them all. Fruit of the spirit.
So while you're about to say those,
Love.
my only counter on that, Kaylani, would be this. If people were born and raised and lived in environments where there's toxicity, where there is always drama and chaos, it's normalized. So you don't always know that you're not, you don't always know that those things are abnormal. It's like, if your parents never got along, then you getting into a relationship with a man or a woman or whatever, and y'all arguing all the time, it seems completely normal. It's like,
That means they love you. They wouldn't even fight with you if they didn't love you.
Yeah. And then if it's like, if you get along too much, there's this thing of like, well, what's going, like, is everything okay type? So even though what you're saying, don't get into is, I agree with you 150%. It is true. But we also just have to take into consideration those people that, and I want you to read them too, but those people that have never experienced peace. So they wouldn't even know that they're not operating in peace. Like, most negative people don't even know that they are crabby all the time, because they don't know no different.
Oh, 100% for sure. Well, so then if you're listening to this, let's examine those things, right? Because that toxicity, unhealthy relationships, arguing, bickering, don't even raise your voice at me, right? I don't even want, like, as a man, don't even bring yourself to raise your voice at me. I heard my dad has just naturally a loud just voice. And I remember yelling, being a kid, I'm like, my dad yelling all the time. And I'm at this place like now, if a man even can't control his emotions, I'm like, no, absolutely not. So anyway, fruit of the spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, generosity, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Self-control is so big for me. So if any of those places are areas where you're experiencing the adverse, then that should just indicate to you that likely there's probably a root issue or something going on there that you can address, because what we're seeking are the fruits of the Spirit, which, Jade, the word for me is peace, 100%. So that's good. So now that we're about 35, 40 minutes in, when we start to take action to live for ourselves, right, and love ourselves properly, take radical self responsibility, like we know that we're supposed, like we want to empower ourselves the way that Nasima said, some people don't really react in a positive, supportive manner. And I want to talk about what that does for relationships. So I don't remember who just said it, but if we start to impose a boundary and somebody has a problem with it, right? So Jade, your marriage, for example, which you were just talking about, as you start to impose some boundaries, you know, then and take radical self-responsibility, you essentially then stop enabling the person or the monster that you contribute to creating, right? So I really want to talk about what happens when we do impose boundaries for ourselves and for others, just so people can maybe get a grasp or understanding of that process and how uncomfortable it can be sometimes. So has anybody had to impose a boundary and other people around you were like, what the heck?
Yeah, I'm gonna kick this one off, because over the weekend I took a 2-day course with Dr. Julie Gerner, who is a performance psychologist, psychiatrist. I don't know. She's a doctor in New York. She works with people that have had multi-billion-dollar exits from startups. And if you're a Billions fan, she calls herself the Wendy Rhodes of, you know, the business world. So she's one of the probably most amazing. I did about a year of therapy with her for performance coaching purposes, but obviously it's all encompassing. And then this workshop was life-changing, even though it was only 2 days. And there is this idea, and I think it falls right into place with the idea of radical, self-awareness and responsibility. And that is that if you right now took a moment, if you're watching, you're listening on the panel with me, whatever, you take a moment to think about who you are right now. And only you could be brutally honest, right? The truth, the ugly mirror. Only you could be really brutally honest with who you are right now. Right. And then there's this ideal self that you have, this ideal life, this ideal, like they say, journal. What does he look like? What does the house look like? What do the kids look like? What does the cat looks like? You have this ideal self that you want to create. Now, there's an analysis that you do between the differences of yourself right now and that person. Now, if you imagine the person that operates at that capacity, just from your viewpoint, you don't know everything about everyone, but just from your viewpoint, if you imagine the person that operates at that capacity and just watch how they are, watch what do they look like? What are they wearing? How are they talking? How are they walking? What are they doing? Right? And you see, now you understand that the gap between your self as it stands now and this ideal version of yourself. You're not coveting, you're not seeking to be like someone else. You've got this ideal version of who you want to become. That ideal version is going to require lots of changes, primarily in the state of your emotional being, how you approach life in every circumstance, every conversation, every conflict, every challenge, every goal, how you approach those things. It's going to require a higher level of emotional intelligence. It's going to require a different way of showing up physically, amongst all the other detailed ways that we can describe the difference between my current self and my ideal self. So if I'm bridging this gap, and there was this phenomenal method that she taught us about bridging that gap, and it makes you understand and realize that you are going to lose people. So there's a crab box mentality that has to end if you want growth. If you don't want to grow and you like where your life is right now in every capacity, well, turn the TV off, move on. There's nothing to talk about. Go on about your life and be happy. But if you don't like where you are right now, and there is a gap between who you are currently, from the way that you look, from the way that you talk, from the way that you attract, maintain relationships, from the way that you produce, from the way that you save, from the way that you earn, from the way that you invest. If there is a radical difference between who you are now and what that ideal self looks like, and you are ready to be radically self-aware and take radical responsibility for who you are and where you want to become and map that out, you're going to lose people. So you're going to lose things. Maybe you stop buying a certain thing. Maybe you stop wearing a certain thing. Maybe you stop talking to certain people. Maybe you stop going to certain places, which eventually kills off certain relationships. And if you're not ready for that level of change, if you're not ready for that level of disruption in your life, even with the way you view that person in the mirror, then the change is not going to come. And I think that that's a reality most people have to face. Like, how real do we want to get, right? Like, there is a gap between where you are right now and where you want to be. And to become that ideal person, you have to make severe changes to the way you do things. And it starts with the promise I made for myself, the plan that I have for this. You know, we can get into the details. I spent 2 whole days getting into those details, so it's not going to be a quick thing. But if you just write down, who am I right now? And you compare that to the ideal self, not what anyone else thinks, not what anyone else is imposing. Nobody has to read that document. It's really just you keeping it real with yourself. And you have to realize some of the changes that you're going to make to get to that, you're going to leave a few people behind. And how ready are you for that conversation with yourself?
People seasonal too.
Woo, that's good. And ooh, that's good. I'm not even gonna lie, Patty. Dang, that's good. I can only imagine how great that workshop was.
Yeah, it was incredible. I also got into a mastermind, which is going to be it's a 12-month commitment for some very radical coaching in this level. And these are people that are operating at a way higher level than I am, because I have a new goal that I imagine. And it's funny because it's like the question that you ask yourself. There was a guy who is, I got to share these notes with you ladies. I haven't even fully digested everything, but there was a gentleman who really took his life to the next level, and he's a multi-billionaire. His company's worth a couple $1 billion, and he started on YouTube with nothing, on his couch in India, right? And how did it become worth multiples of billions of dollars? He said, you have to be very clear about what game you're playing. Okay. So let's just talk about that on a personal level. We're all ladies here. And you say, what game am I playing? I want a husband. Okay. I want a husband. Let's say I want a husband. If it's as simple as that, we'll keep it as simple as that. So I had a girlfriend who was a psychiatrist. She finished school. She finished her residency. She was ready to get married and have kids. She went on Match.com. She went on 50+ dates. And on the very last coffee date, she met her husband. It's a numbers game, right? Now, some people say, I want a husband, but they're sitting at home Netflix and chilling with their damn self for 15 hours every single day, right? So you're not going to meet anybody if you're not taking the action. So with that very simplistic example, we're saying if you want something, there's a certain behavior, an emotional state of being. She had to get up, she had to get ready, she had to be energetic, go on 50+ dates with random strangers to go meet her husband. You're not going to get what you want without action, without change, without a commitment, without something that has to change in your behavior. It's the behavior that changes. So how do you change the behavior is really the main thing, because most people say, I just don't know. I mean, I'm getting up, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. I don't know. There is a certain emotional response that you have to thoughts that take place to a certain goal that you set. And until you can change that, and in this particular topic, it's about radical self-awareness and self-responsibility, you won't break through to the next level. You can't. It's not possible. Just like if you want a husband, you can't sit up in your room and wait for a husband to show up at your front door. It's really that simple. So I think that those are things that we really need to take into consideration. Like, we're talking about nobody's coming to save you. Okay, look, if you want to make an extra $50,000 a year, you're not going to do that by joining in on this conversation every Wednesday at 4 p.m. PST. You're going to have to go knock on some doors and sell some shit, right? So that's the thing. There's a difference between where I'm at and where I want to be. And that requires radical self-awareness, radical self-responsibility, and massive action, change, a change in your behavior. Most people don't want that change. They want to talk about the goal, but they don't want the change. And I promise you that change will result in losing people.
That's good. I'll say this, like, you're making me think about like making a list of all the things that I've procrastinated on, right? Obviously I want to go to another level in life, but to your point of, Kaylani brought up boundaries. Patty, you brought up losing people. Let's just say there's a financial goal that I want to meet. I can't say yes every time the girls want to go out. You get what I'm saying? That is my boundary. And some of those people may actually not be okay with me telling them no, so they may not go to the next level with me. It is the sacrifice and the discipline. And one of the things that I am taking responsibility for is because I'll just say 4 or 5 years ago, when I looked at my circle, I was probably one of the most responsible and successful. Then God said, oh, you think you're doing something? Okay, I'm going to put you in some other rooms with some other women and some other people that are running circles around you. And that's when you get your aha moment where you're like,
Yes.
they say, get in other rooms. Don't be the smartest and most successful person in this room, because when you're always like doing more than everybody else, you really think you're doing something. And then you get in these other rooms. Think about it. Even with being on with you ladies or whatever, you inspire me to want to do more, because I'm like, oh, snap. Like, I got a goal of this, but then I'm talking to Patty that's like, oh no, 100 million, a billion. What are you talking about? I'm like, wow, I think too small. Like, and it does change your perspective, who you're hanging around. And it makes you have to face reality and say, everybody else thinks I'm doing something, but I really ain't doing nothing, because there's so much more I can get to. And it's going to require another level of discipline. So that's so freaking
I have to add to that something I just remembered from the weekend workshop, which you nailed it. But there's a state where the person says, this is just who I am. Like, I'm not a morning person. This is just who I am. Well, you're damn right. And nothing's going to change in your life, because that's just who you are. Because you have to be able to change the behavior. And the example that I thought of while you were talking is, let's just talk about behavior when it comes to speaking. So you got a certain person who is listening right now, and they go, hey, you know what? I grew up here. This is how I talk. This is what I am. This is what it is. This is what it do. Right? Okay, cool. Well, when you walk into a room and you're making, let's say, $50,000, $60,000 a year. Now you're walking into a room that someone makes $250,000 or $350,000 a year. I guarantee you they don't have that same immature mindset, and they don't have that same immature mouthpiece, right? But you want to be so true and so real and keep it so hood or keep it so real. And I don't want to grow from this, that I'm not willing to change that behavior. That's the crab box mentality. So depending on whatever level that you're at, there are lots of people that want to hold on to certain things. I used to tell people all the time, my friends, I'm from the Bay. We don't have, we're independent minded people, right, Nasima? We don't have this, and we don't run our mouths, right? So the internet was, especially Twitter, was a funny place. So I was like, okay, cool. Everybody's talking so much on the internet because they're dying for everybody to know how real they are. Where we in the Bay Area, the mindset is, I don't care what you know about me. I don't care how real you think I am, how well connected you think I am, who you think I know, or what the situation is. The less you know, the safer I am, right? We call that game goofy. You're hustling backwards. You're doing it wrong, right? So the idea is that nobody needs to know that, right? You do have to understand that if you were a professional baseball player, you're not wearing the same uniform on the baseball field that you were wearing inside the locker room. You have to put on something else to go out and play the game. And that's something a lot of people really have a hard time with. So if you're not willing to radically change your behavior, you're not willing for change. You're not willing to change. And you can't do that without radical self-responsibility.
And that, my friends, is what she said. What? Okay.
so good.
That fully deserves to go viral. 1010%.
Not today. I couldn't get my hair done right. Don't post that today. Not today.
It's already on the internet. If it's got, somebody got it. It's on the internet. All right, let's go ahead and recap real quick, because this was so good. And this is exactly what we mean, right? Radical self-responsibility. Radical change requires radical movement, right? And so these are the takeaways. And real quick before it's okay. First one from Nasima, love yourself. Number 2, accept help. Jade said accept help. That's so good. Number 3, go to therapy, sis. All 4 of us, 10 out of 10, highly recommend. Number 4, be honest with yourself, and really honest, right? The truth, the deep truth, not the surface truth, the truth. Number 5, prune and propagate, which is the whole idea that not everybody can go, right? Apostle said in the comments, where God is taking you, the air might be too thin. So not everybody's has lung capacity for that, right? So Nipsey said it, circle getting smaller, everybody can't go. And number 6, Jade just said, get in.
I just would like to clarify that Sean Carter said that first, but hey, Nipsey.
R.I.P. to Nip. Okay, can you not? Goodness. Anyway, so that's your free game for this Wednesday, ladies. and gentlemen. So thank you guys for being on, tapping back in. If you're not already, please like, comment, and subscribe. We've got I haven't really brought the ladies up to speed quite yet, but I've got a team working in the background on something fun for us here. So thank you guys for being with us at the ground level while we get this thing going. If you guys have anything you would like us to discuss or talk about, I already got a request for next week, and it's knowing when to start over, which I think is going to be a really, really good one. So I got that request for next week. So that'll be on the agenda. So if you guys have any requests at all, hit the inbox, follow us on socials, exchange some social currency. And ladies and gentlemen, that's been another successful Wednesday on that, is what she said. Anybody got anything before we need to go? Anything super important?
I do. Patty, I know you're in this like intensive for the next 12 months. I know you paid some good money, but can you please share with us?
Yes, I got you. I was going to say my closing statement was going to be, I can't wait to bring that knowledge, because here's the thing. In 2025, it's going to be all about growth. And I want to say, from an economic standpoint, this next run, get it while you can. There is a lot changing in the world, and maybe I can open with that a little bit next week, but I got you. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Period. All right, ladies and gentlemen. What's that, Nasima?
I said, see, it's the circles you're in. It's the rooms that you're in. Like, how would you even know what's possible unless you change your circle of influence? So I love my circles.
Oh, we love you.
I wish I talked as sweet as you do, Nasima, man. I need to stop yelling.
I'm
already not gonna like the replay. I get into a whole nother zone. It's like my Sasha Fierce comes out and I just lose it.
We like her. We like her very much. But I'm on 1%. So I'm going to go ahead and end this stream before we lose everything. Guys, we'll be back same time, same place next week. We'll see you later. And stay on, ladies, for just a quick second. Bye, everybody.
Bye.